Hello, and welcome to Derp Shield's Journey into the Unknown. This is part 6, Hopping Around the Mun. In this episode, we continue where I left off in the previous episode, which is we had just landed on the Mun with our first self-sustaining mission. That means that we can land on the Mun, refuel through Kethane, and continue onward to the next biome. Even using the LVNs, the most efficient rocket that I have available, I had to refuel every other biome. So I would do a hop, then I would do another hop and have to refuel there, otherwise I wouldn't have enough fuel to both take off and land at the next biome unless they were extremely close together. The picture-in-picture mode you're viewing right now goes in order from the first landing to the last landing, from top left to bottom right. While the last one isn't exactly a landing, it is a funny experience where I was screaming at Jeb to actually use his RCS pack because I went to go explore a hole, messed up at the very top, and fell all the way to the bottom. Anyway, deviating from the landings that you are viewing currently, I thought I'd talk about the process of creating this picture-in-picture and where I got the idea exactly. The process for creating it was actually a lot more tedious than I was expecting. Firstly, I had to render each landing as a single video clip. This was mainly done to eliminate some problems that I was having during the rendering process when I was trying to use them as segments rather than full clips. I then rendered this section by itself because I didn't like having 15 different layers for videos. I wanted to just have the one that I usually have. The funny thing is, even though this is a 2-minute and 13-second segment, it took over 90 minutes to fully render. The reason this is so unusual is that generally in the creation of these videos I get about 2 seconds in real time to about 1 second of video time for render times. The reason why I'm bringing this up as just a point of discussion is I didn't realize how intensive picture-in-picture would be for rendering. I knew that I was going to increase the render time, I just wasn't prepared for the fact that a 2-minute render that I thought would have taken 7 minutes took over an hour and a half. Anyway, that's just a small point of discussion that I thought I would bring up because I found it interesting and maybe you guys will as well. As to the origins of this picture-in-picture mode, I watched Abyssal Lurker's 2 Ships, 1 Tree, and in it he lands on all of the Mun's biomes in a single go and has every single landing as a separate picture on the screen. And I thought that was a really cool idea, so I am borrowing it. Also, I totally recommend watching Abyssal Lurker's stuff. He doesn't put out videos very often, but the videos he does put out are incredible. Anyway, without further ado, back to the mission at hand. We find ourselves leaving the Mun's sphere of influence. This is a relatively long process since the thrust-weight ratios on the LVNs are horrendously low, but they make up for that with their extreme efficiency, which 9 times out of 10, if I can build a ship out of LVNs, I'll do it because I like the fuel savings. Also, you may have noted, I'm not any better at leaving the Mun or Minmus's sphere of influence and getting a free return trajectory to Kerbin. Well, free is relative, you're still spending the fuel, but you're spending less fuel. But as it turns out, it's not a bad thing because I had a lot of fuel and this spacecraft is by no means reentry worthy. I tried a couple of times and every time it inevitably flipped out and all the parachutes burned up. Well, I guess that's a far and deadly reentry doing its work, so on to make a dedicated reentry craft since this seems to be a common theme in my videos. Making craft that just will not reenter because I made them for, other things like non-atmospheric bodies. But before I can go ahead and make that re-entry craft, I should probably get into a relatively normal orbit, not this highly elliptical, crazy inclination that I have right now, because that's just going to be a pain to rendezvous with. That's what I'm doing right now. I cut out most of the boring bits because it was just like a 3-minute burn of me just sitting there going, why isn't this faster? Well, I guess that's LVNs again, but oh well. And here is the Kerbin return craft, a monument to the abuse of SRBs. Those 4 rockets on the side, they're actually SRBs. They are the larger SRBs added in by the Rocketry. I thought rather than making, some normal looking rocket, I'd try to abuse SRBs as much as I can, and as it turns out, having a relatively small craft in those SRBs, they can almost get you to orbit, no problems asked. Once those large SRBs burn out, we switch to the good old mainsail, the staple for pretty much all of my crafts for at least the lifter stage. In all honesty, for such a relatively low part count ship, it performs really well. I wasn't expecting that. A few things go wrong with this launch, even though it wasn't ship error, it was more user error, simply because I put the lander can on backwards so the controls were reversed, so I had to compensate for that until I spun it around. At this point, it's just a rendezvous, which you've all seen 100 times, and they're not exactly interesting, so I'm just going to skip over it and show the crafts near enough to each other, and then do the EVAs across. Alright, so just doing some pretty simple hops between ships using the EVA packs. Checking to make sure there's no science left on board, which I missed. Turns out that there's a little bit of science, but I can't take it with me because the Interstellar mod pack has not been updated to the point where you can right click on a part and say take data. I bet that will be implemented here soon. Anyway, I may have to come back up here and attach some sort of radio antenna to it somehow. Alright, now that the last Kerbal from the MUN mission has been safely stowed upon board the Kerbin rescue craft, it's time to get that old Kethane scanner which we sent out there in addition to find the Kethane on the MUN. We're going to repurpose this craft, so in order to do that I'm going to rendezvous with the rescue craft and replace the crew that is currently in it with the crew that was brought up. Just, switch it around. And then I'm going to decide where to send this Kethane scanner next. It's probably going to head towards Jewel, although I haven't quite yet decided what to do with it. And to switch out the crew, we have to rendezvous. I'm not going to bore you with that because, like I said previously, rendezvous are rather uninteresting to watch. And in my attempts to reuse this Kethane scanner, whoops, there goes a Gigantor solar array. Unfortunately, I didn't have a quick save within a couple hours of this because I thought nothing was going to go wrong during rendezvous because I never have issues with them at this point. And so the Kethane scanner is down a solar panel, which may slow down the rate of scanning, I don't know, but it's a thing, and I thought it rather funny because I did this in an attempt to reuse a spacecraft, and I ended up damaging it in the process. Now that the crew is more or less exchanged with each ship, it's time to bring the reentry vehicle home and see if it will actually do its job for which it was designed. I actually hadn't tested this, so I was a bit worried that it may in fact break during re-entry, but let's watch and see what happens. For all the thrusting, I'm also using the RCS to help increase the thrust a little, because at this point it's just dead weight, which could cause issues during re-entry. So I'm using up as much as I can to help shift the center of mass downward so that it won't flip out and burn up all the parachutes during re-entry. Now that we have a rendezvous with the atmosphere of Kerbin, it's time to do the old re-entry maneuvers of burning up the right pieces. Just using a little bit of fuel here to help kill my velocity, but I decided it's not worth the risk because I don't want those that's staying attached and potentially exploding my craft. So I ditch it and get ready for re-entry effects to start happening. This craft was actually surprisingly stable during the violent re-entry effects. Only a couple of parts exploded. I believe it was a landing leg and a random parachute up at the top. So nothing too bad. I'll just have to keep that in mind that parts do occasionally explode during re-entry, even with a dedicated craft. At this point I'm just using the RCS thrusters because I have monopropellant and this craft isn't going to stay in use for very much longer, so might as well get the full use out of the monopropellant while I can. At this point, the parachutes begin to deploy one by one, simply to avoid the jarring effect that would generally happen at 500 meters above the surface. I really do love the tweakables that they added in the .23 update. When all is said and done for this mission, I earn a cool 5.4 thousand science, which is rather impressive considering I only visited about 8 biomes on the Mun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.